Hi, welcome to Panther City Partners. I am Leann Findley Maxwell. We are talking about transitions and change and life, and we've just finished a series of topics on college and college study skills. And so I kind of wanted to continue with the same topic of college, but in a different way. I feel like so often we spend time thinking about college as only a means to a career. And not all of us, myself included, have a career in what we went to college for. And so I wanted to have a few guests on that could kind of speak to that and what they're doing. So today I'm very fortunate to have a good friend of mine. Her name is Jess Grady. I will let her explain what she does because she does so many things and she's so good at so many things. I just want to remind everyone that the only constant is change, and you don't have to go it alone. And I am fortunate enough to have someone great like Jess in my life that I don't have to navigate transitions alone. And so, Jess, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for asking me.
So tell us first, Jess, what you do now.
So I co-own two companies with a friend and partner, and we own Cat City Creative and David Maxine Paper. And so I do graphic design mostly, some animation, some web design, lots of different things.
Yeah. So yeah, she's very creative. What though did you go to college for? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that it was not graphic design.
So my undergrad is actually in archaeology and museum studies.
Okay. So that degree brings up a lot of first question is how did your family feel about that choice of a degree?
So I actually started, my granddad is an accountant. And so I thought, that sounds great. And so I went to school thinking that I would be an accountant. So I started taking classes there first, and it was not a good fit. And I worked at a firm in the summer, and I was drawing the whole time I was working. I mean, I was supposed to be answering phones. And I did do that, but I also was drawing. And the woman said, please don't go in this field.
That's hilarious.
And so... But then I just started getting interested in, I've always loved museums. And so Baylor was one of the only schools in Texas besides Tech that had a museum studies program. And I started taking classes and I just loved it.
That's awesome.
And you couldn't just get a degree in museum studies. It had to be a dual bachelor. And so I picked archaeology because I've always wanted to do that. And actually met my husband in an archaeology dig. So I'd say it worked out pretty well.
It did work out well. Well, I want to point something out because I think you make a good point there of like you did this internship with an accounting firm. And I think that oftentimes we think of an internship as supposed to help you figure out what you do want to do. But your internship helped you figure out what you didn't want to do. And that's just as important as finding out what you do want to do.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just had this vision of I don't know why I thought it would. I guess because it says stable.
Right.
My granddad worked until he was 95. So.
Wow.
And so it just wasn't a fit for me. And I took a bunch of classes, and I wish I had not probably taken some of them and paid for them. But I think it was really good to learn. It just wasn't a fit for me. And so I think it was helpful to work there and talk to people that worked in different fields. There were auditors and accountants and, I realized I didn't want to do any of those.
Right. Which is a really important thing to learn at that age.
Yes.
Well, I do think it's interesting that like you just thought, oh, accounting sounds good without really knowing anything about it. And I think that happens all the time with college freshmen. We're asking them in the summer before they even start school, when they come to orientation most of the time, choose a major. And they often do what you did, like, I'm going to pick this. I mean, my first major was communication sciences and disorders. And I did know what that was going to be. I thought I was going to be a speech pathologist, but I didn't really understand what all that entailed. But that's what I put on my application when I applied to UT. And so we're asking students to make these decisions when they really have no idea. Like you knew your grandfather was an accountant, but you didn't really understand what the ins and outs of daily work would look like.
I'm really not like my granddad at all, so I'm not sure what I was thinking.
That's pretty funny. So after that internship, you came back to Baylor and you changed your major like pretty much immediately, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then how did that go, that conversation with your parents?
I think partly they were like, yep, that makes sense.
Good choice.
I mean, there was a lot of talk. They were very honest in the field that, you're going to be very poor if you choose these fields.
Like the school was very honest with you?
The school was very honest.
Mm-hmm.
My museum studies professors were like, these are the facts. This is how much you pay for school. This is how much you'll probably make in your first few jobs. Most museums are nonprofits. And then archaeology, they're like, you're going to be traveling a lot.
Right.
And if you have a family, this can be a problem. I mean, they were really honest. And so
you didn't go into that blindly. Like it wasn't like you went in with stars in your eyes.
No, they were really
very
good
honest.
about
That's great.
Yeah. I think the first class I had, they kind of laid it out.
Oh, good. Good.
And so I think that my parents were they're really open to it. My dad has always had kind of owned different businesses. And so it made sense to him.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you continue through the degree and you graduate. And so then what did you do once you graduated? Did you get a job in that field or something else or?
So I interned actually in town at the Log Cabin Village.
That's right.
And I highly recommend that place to everyone. I loved it.
Yay.
It was wonderful. I told that it's like I got an internship and therapy all at the same time. I worked with a bunch of older retired women.
Right.
They were very loving.
Oh, that's nice.
But I realized I really loved to do the certain part of the job, accessioning, like you go through and research all the different items and then fill out all the information about it. I really loved that. But then I didn't know if I wanted to stay in Fort Worth permanently. So I applied for jobs in DC and then I ended up moving there and working for a traveling museum exhibit company.
Oh, okay.
And I really loved that. But then I realized, well, then I worked at various other places. I realized that it was really important to me, more important who I worked with in some ways, because I absolutely loved my job. But the person I worked for was not an easy person to work for.
Right. So you were able to get jobs initially that were in the field that you had studied, but even though you liked the jobs, you didn't necessarily like the people you were working for.
I loved my coworkers, but the people in charge were very difficult to work for.
Right, right. Do you think that was like the nature of that specific industry, or do you just think that there's bad bosses in any kind of job that you have?
There are. I think there are difficult people to work for, and I've always, I'm still close to a lot of, this was 20 years ago.
Right.
20 years. But I'm still really close to a lot of the people that I worked with. And so that was great. But I don't know if it was just the field too. There's a lot of, because we were working with traveling art exhibits, there was a lot of money and a lot of people with a different idea of what reality was.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
that's interesting.
Than my reality of coming from Texas.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that you felt like you needed, well, you didn't, I guess you didn't need to, but if you're going to get a degree in museum studies, it seems like a place like Washington, D.C. is a good place to go because they do have lots of museums.
I actually got that job through a temp agency.
Oh.
And so I went to a temp agency and I temped at the National Gallery for a little bit and I had an opportunity to work there in the Treasury Department, but still there.
Yeah.
And so they were great about trying to find a good fit, actually.
That's great. So I think that seems like a really good tip is that I think that people often think that the only way to find jobs is to like go to specific companies. But if you start with a temp agency, then you tell them what you are good at or what you have experience in, and then they can help match you up.
Yeah, they were great. And so I tempted a bunch in Smithsonian Magazine and just different places, and they were trying to get me into all those spots. So it was a great city for that degree.
Right. So you temped with all those different places, and then you ultimately found your permanent job. So it's nice that you were able to kind of get some experience in lots of different areas of museum studies, but then you ultimately landed on a permanent job.
Right.
And how long did you work at that permanent job?
Just a year.
Just a year. Okay. And so then what did you do next?
Then I worked at a theater.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So you're shifting gears. It's still in like kind of like the creative environment, but it's shifting gears a little bit. And what did you do at the theater?
So I did all kinds of things. There was only the director and myself. And
okay,
so
you're the only paid staff.
And she didn't really always pay herself.
Wow.
So I was really the only paid staff.
Wow.
It was a great theater in Alexandria, Virginia. But it was a small theater, and so sometimes I would run lights, and I learned how to do that. And then I would make the programs and call subscribers. I mean, it was just a bunch of different things.
So you got to learn how to do lots of different things, which seems like it's probably really helpful now that you own your own business because you learned like all the things that you would need to do. Even though you don't own a theater, there's still a lot of things that cross over.
good contact with your subscriber, all kinds of things. And I do look back and think, oh, I wish I had done this better for them, or I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. You were young and didn't have any experience
But
at the time.
I did know that one thing I loved doing, I would sometimes take photos of the actors for the newspaper. We would have to put, stuff in the newspaper. And I also really loved to make the programs. I wasn't very good at it.
Right.
But I would just play with it all the time. And that's something I did in college too, is I would find Photoshop and then I was like constantly teaching myself things.
Right. Right.
And so I knew even at the theater that I really found a lot of enjoyment in those things.
In like the graphic design and then the picture taking element of it. Okay. Wow. So it sounds like you're picking up little tidbits wherever you're working. You worked as in the accounting department or the accounting firm, and you realized, nope, this is not for me. And then you worked at the Log Cabin Village and you learned, oh, I do like this piece of it. I like the research aspect. I like the finding the artifacts and doing all the research and cataloging for them. And then you worked at the traveling exhibit and you realized, hey, I like my coworkers, but I don't like my boss. And so you have found, so every single stop along the way, you're learning more things about yourself. You're ultimately at the theater and you're figuring out, actually, I do like the graphic design. I do like the visual aspect of what I'm doing.
Right.
So you're picking up these pieces of what you're ultimately going to do at every single stop along the way. Yeah.
And I don't think that I just didn't really know what I didn't have a lot of experience in that field. No one in my family did that. And so I just didn't even know what to call it yet. Even outside of college, I just didn't take any of those classes. And I mean, looking back, I wish I had taken some. But
well, and it's evolved so much. I mean, you said we were both in college about 20 years ago. And that field of graphic design has changed tremendously in that time. Because now it's so much more computer-based. At the time, in the early 90s and 2000s, when we would have been in college, it would have been some computer-based, but it would have been a lot more hand drawing.
Right. It's like watching Mad Men.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, you have to change the whole drawing after
to pick
if you have to change
one
something.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But so then from there, I actually started working at GW, George Washington University. And I worked in doing customer service.
Okay.
But I was able to get tuition reimbursement for taking classes.
Oh, nice.
And so I started to pursue a master's degree at GW.
Okay. And what were you looking for your master's in? What were you going to class for?
I was hoping to do anthropology and also I was doing museum studies. But I realized that you can't work full-time and do the internship that was required for museum studies. But I really loved my classes. But also, I realized I still thought that maybe I wanted to do museum studies and do conservation.
Okay.
But I realized that you really need a lot of chemistry background to do that. Oh. And that is just something I knew in high school, even that was not.
So you're not just with conservation, you're having to use chemicals to like strip away the dirt and the grime of old artifacts.
Right.
Okay.
To protect everything. And it was still really interesting to study. My classes were actually in the Smithsonian collection. So I got to take the back elevator up and stuff.
That's cool.
It was very exciting. And again, I loved that too. And I loved learning it. But then I realized that it would not be a long-term fit for my situation.
So you ultimately didn't graduate from grad school.
True.
So I think that that's another good point to point out, is that I think that sometimes people are interested in going to grad school, but they don't really know why they want to go to grad school, or they haven't really thought through exactly what the long-term job would look like if they did get that degree.
Right.
And you were able to say, hey, this isn't the right thing. So I need to just like cut my losses at this point and be appreciative for what I've learned, but not try to stick with it if I know that ultimately it's not what I'm going to do.
I'm so thankful that I got to take the classes, and I only had to pay 4%.
Oh, that's nice.
And so it was still kind of a lot of money at GW.
Sure.
But it was great to be able to do that.
Yeah. And that's hard to I'm sure at that time it was probably very hard for you to say, hey, I'm not going to finish this because we're taught, everyone, and I mean, that's kind of like the American way. Like you finish what you start.
Right.
And even if it's not the right thing. Like I still have trouble putting down a book. Even if I don't like the book, I have trouble stopping reading it because I'm like, I started it. I have to finish it.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of courage, I would say, to stop a graduate program when you realize it's not the right thing for you.
It helped too, I think, because my husband was also just really bored in his job. And so we loved living in DC, but we had been there for 5 years and we thought that we needed something different.
Yeah.
So he decided he wanted to go back to school for a totally different thing also. And so we ended up moving back to Texas. And so then I pursued photography more.
Right.
That opened it up.
Right. So there were lots of transitions happening in your life at the time that you decided, hey, this graduate program is not for me anymore.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you just stopped, but you were still working at GW and still having to be around all those people that were in the program.
I probably would have still probably not pursued a degree, but kept taking classes because it was such a great deal. And it was great learning.
Yeah, it was. And I think that you bring up a good point there that the learning for the sake of learning is a great thing to do.
Yeah. I know. I feel like we don't let ourselves do that really. Yeah. So.
I feel like that now it's easier for me. Like there's programs like on edX and some like online classes that I can take. I don't have to pay a ton of money.
Yep.
I don't have to pursue a specific degree, but I can just go back and take some psychology classes or some things that I'm interested in. But the pressure is different because I'm doing it because I want to do it. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for a grade. I'm not doing it for a diploma. I'm not doing it to get a certain job. I'm just trying to cultivate and grow personally.
One thing I did notice that I wanted to say that whenever I was in college, I was not a great student. I mean, towards the end, I was better.
Sure.
But when I went back to grad school and I had a full-time job and I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. I made straight A's and I found something that I really enjoyed learning and I really appreciated my teacher's time.
Right.
And really respected that they were taking time out of their life to go do this, So the difference between just a couple of years was amazing,
It is a big difference. I think that also coming with some work experience and then going back to school and really valuing that I get to learn, I don't just have to be making money, definitely changes your perspective as a student. And it's just hard as when you come in at 18, 19 to have that perspective because often you don't have anything else. I mean, you've always been in school and so you're just continuing school. So it's not really that you have the appreciation for what college truly is.
Right. Yeah.
So you moved back to Texas. And what did you do once you got here? You said you started kind of getting more into photography, but that wasn't yet paying the bills.
Right. So my husband and I, we needed to be residents of Texas again. So we moved to Austin for a year just to get back in that so he could go take some classes he needed to take. And then we ended up working for the Dells for a year, which was great. We worked together. He did construction and I did their books.
Okay.
Not for the Dells, for the construction company.
Right.
And it was fine. I knew it was going to be a temporary thing and we were sharing a car.
And it worked out
great. It worked out great for us.
I'm wondering if some of those accounting classes, though, that you took in your undergrad that you ultimately didn't do, did that help you when you were doing the books?
It did some. And then also there's just so much available online now.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and because I had a basic understanding, but it has really helped me now what I had to learn then.
Right.
And so I basically had to teach myself through various things, but there's just so much good information online.
That's true.
And so I was able to do, it was just a year. And so it worked out.
And then y'all moved from Austin to College Station. And did you get a full-time job when you were there or how did that work?
No, actually, I struggled. I was so used to the job market in DC. I mean, you could get a job. It was so easy to find something in my field.
Right.
And it was just not easy at all. And I really was starting to be more and more interested in photography and graphic design. And so I started doing more wedding invitations. And then I started doing wedding photography.
So you were doing freelance stuff at this point?
Yep.
Okay. And how did you break into doing wedding photography?
It really started, I think, with doing some engagement photos for my brother for free. But we spent the whole day and he and his wife let me take lots of photos. And I realized that I really did love it. And so I just built a website and then put some pictures on there and then slowly was able to get more clients in College Station.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's nice that you had that. I mean, it was nice that it was your brother and sister-in-law, but that you had this freedom kind of to take different types of pictures. And I've seen those pictures and they're beautiful, by the way. Even if they were your first real professional pictures, you did some really cool things, but you had like the time and the freedom to do some cool things.
Yeah.
That if it had been a paid job, you might not have felt like, or if it had been for somebody that wasn't a family member, you might not have felt like you could have been experimental or tried some things that you were able to
I couldn't
try.
have gone on to him so much to smile more. No, it was really great to be able to do that. I mean, we probably spent 5 hours just going to all these different locations. And, but yeah, it just really cemented my knowledge. I mean, I just knew that I really loved it.
Right.
So.
Right. So then you guys move after your husband graduates from graduate school at A&M. He gets a job.
In New Mexico.
In New Mexico. So you moved to New Mexico.
Yeah.
And he's starting his new career in this new field. And then what are you doing at that point?
So this is really a great opportunity in my life. I got a job at a newspaper in town.
Okay.
And the pay was very low. The town is poorer in general than where we live now. But I thought it over and I thought I could either pay to go to class and learn these things, or I could get paid to go to work and learn these things.
So like what kinds of things are you learning on this job at the newspaper?
So I was not familiar with the program Adobe InDesign at all.
Okay.
And it's a really important thing to learn for graphic designers, but I just had no experience.
Right.
But that's something the newspaper used all the time.
Okay.
To build their pages and to build ads. And we did a lot of special magazines and stuff. And I worked with wonderful people that I'm still close to.
Yeah.
And they were really patient. And I'm a fast learner and try to teach myself a lot.
So when you're learning on the job like that, are you taking classes, or you're just like getting in there and getting your hands dirty?
I'm getting in there and I am asking a lot of questions. Yeah. I tried to not repeat any of my questions.
Right.
But I did. I mean, I loved it so much that I was doing stuff at home, also still doing some freelance stuff. But I just went and said, I'm not sure how to do this, or can I watch you do this? And so when I first started, I worked with a really talented artist, and he would draw like the fair maps and stuff for the Renaissance Fair or whatever. And I just said, can I just watch you? And so I get to watch how he used different tools and different programs. And I am not afraid to ask for help.
That's just what I was about to say. Like, this is one of the tools that I try to impart to my college clients is be a help seeker. And that's something that I feel like sometimes we're taught not to do. Like, don't ask questions. It makes you look dumb. But asking questions is how you learn things. And you have to be able to ask them, and you have to know how to ask them the right way in order to elicit the type of help that you need.
I never asked for help in college. And looking back, it's
ridiculous.
I don't know why I didn't do that. I mean, I was struggling in some classes and I never once went to the teacher. And now as an adult looking back, I'm like, they were there to help me. And I never even asked for it. So
sometimes I think that that's a function of like, we go to college and we are surrounded by all these people and we all think that we should know what we're doing. Because that's like the myth about college is that you get into college and everybody knows what they're doing. And we're all really good at faking it. And I tell my college clients that all the time. I'm like, not everyone around here is a better student than you. They're just better at acting than you are.
Right. Yeah.
And so it takes a little bit of time of being in other types of jobs. I mean, you may not have been as good a help seeker in those immediate right after college jobs as you were later because you'd had so much experience having to ask for help.
I think when you're young too, that you want to prove that you're fully capable and you're just as good as everybody else instead of just saying, hey, I actually have never done this. Can you show me how to do it right the first time or how to write a press release or, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are willing to help.
Sure. So. And it's also helpful if you go into the job, like you didn't apply for that job and say, hey, I do know how to do these things. And then later they realize you didn't. You were really honest with your skills when you went into the job.
I told them I knew these other programs great. I did not know that, but I demonstrated that I could teach myself and was a fast learner. And I think they took a chance on that.
Yeah, you showed that you had some persistence and some grit and that you were willing to take on the effort of learning those new things.
I think one thing that my manager at the time and I are really close still, and so she has said one thing that she really liked from the beginning was that I was a good communicator and that I would ask for help. And so I think that was good.
So these soft skills that you're learning, you know, I mean, we think about college and getting careers as you have to learn specific skills. And like my spouse is an engineer and your spouse is an architect. And there are certain things you can't just walk in the door at an architecture firm and say, hey, I want to be an architect. You can't just walk into a civil engineering firm and say, can you teach me how to do this? There are some hard skills that you definitely have to learn for certain careers. But there's also a lot of these soft skills that you're learning in college, like how to talk to people, how to communicate written and verbally, how to ask for help, how to do research and find things on your own. Like, yes, ask for help, but with asking for help comes, like, you have to have done a little bit of work for yourself first.
Absolutely.
You don't just walk in and say, hey, I don't know anything. You say, well, I've done this, this, and this. Now I'm stuck. What can you do to help me?
Exactly. Yeah, that's very true.
So those soft skills are things that you didn't just learn in college. You learned those all along the way at all those other jobs that you had in those different industries. What would you say are some of those? I mean, we've talked about the communication skills, but what do you see as like something like, oh, if I hadn't had this particular job, I would never have learned that, or I wouldn't be as good at that now as I am?
I think that one thing with the difficult boss that I had, I learned that it's okay to stand up for myself, and not in any kind of rude way.
Right.
You know, we didn't get into a fight.
Right.
She did throw things sometimes. But
not a good boss. If your boss throws things at you, that is not a good work situation.
We all left our job. But I was able to just stand up for myself and say, I didn't do this, or, you know, I don't deserve this. Or, I think that was really important, though, especially out of college, you're very unsure of yourself. And also to recognize people but that you can work with. And so the person that I work with now, we work together so well. And I think a huge part of it is I've had a bunch of different managers, and I've seen different styles at work, or the communication. I do think communication is just a huge thing. Yeah.
I feel like you're alluding to there when you're talking about standing up for yourself is learning how to set boundaries for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's really hard to learn unless you're kind of on the job, because especially when you're young and you're starting out and you're having your first few jobs, like I know for me, like I just wanted a job and I just wanted to prove myself. So I really didn't have any boundaries initially because I wanted to show them that I am eager and I'm capable and I will do anything. And at the time I really would have done anything. And then now that I'm older, I can actually set boundaries because I know what I'm worth, but I also know that I can prove myself in different ways other than just being a doormat to everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's important for you, what you said about learning who you work with well. I mean, that's made a huge impact on your current business. And if you hadn't had those experiences with, you didn't work with just a couple of different people. And over the course of your career, you've worked with lots of different people and lots of different personalities. And that really helped you get a sense of who you do work best with. And even if it's not the person that you work best with, how to work best with someone that maybe doesn't have the personality.
Or how to deal with difficult situations. I mean, everyone's going to have a difficult client or a difficult situation where someone's unhappy with something or expects more than you can give, and it's good to learn how to handle those situations.
Right.
It's hard.
And those are not the kinds of things that you can learn by taking a class in college.
Right.
I mean, those are things that
you have a bad study partner or something.
True. But typically, they're not standing up there teaching you. When you get with someone who has this type of personality, you should handle it this way. Because that's a very abstract way to think about it. You have to get in there and have that experiential learning to learn how you're going to be able to deal with those. And as you change over time and you grow and develop and age and mature and get more confident with who you are as a person, as a professional, that also changes how you interact with people. And so you can't just walk out of college with all the skills that you need.
No, I feel like I'm still learning so many things.
Of course. So I think that this is a great stopping point for us because we've talked about all of the different things that you've learned along the way. You definitely learned, you left college with a great skill set. And you were able to take that into these different jobs, and sometimes jobs that didn't seem like, working at a newspaper is different than working in the design department at a newspaper is way different than working in customer service on the surface. But you probably were using some of those same skills in both of those positions.
Absolutely. I mean, we dealt with clients all the time and they own businesses and, lots of different things.
Right. So I want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think this was good. What I'm trying to do with some of these interviews right now is to show students and anyone really going through transition that we learn so much along the way, that you don't just leave college or leave a job and you know everything there is to know about that job. You're continuing to grow and continuing to develop, and you have to have those experiences in order to ultimately get to the job that you want to have. And maybe we can come back and talk about the job that you have now as the job that you're wanting to have.
Okay. That'd be great.
So thanks, Jessica. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed this story. Jess has lots of stories of transition and change, but it's interesting to me to see that they all help her to become the person that she is today. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram. Please like, download, share, rate, all of the things that you do for podcasts. I really appreciate you listening. I really appreciate you sharing with someone who you think could benefit from this conversation. Remember, the only constant is change, but you don't have to go it alone. I'm Leann Maxwell with Panther City Partners, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.